Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and this is Thursday, February the 14th. This will be our chart lesson for today. It was a little bit hard to find this channel today. I believe this was the channel, and I believe this was the real break. But really you can, oops, didn't mean to do that. Make sure I got my line back. It's close enough. You could actually move it up here and you still get a channel there as well. So, but normally you get your trend off the first couple of swings, and if you do that, those first two swings right there, and there was definitely a trend at this point right up through here, and maybe this was just the EMA and that's just holding here and that's just the way it looks. I'm not sure, but this is what I was trading as the trend line today, and if you copied it and carried it up, it seemed to be holding on the upside. Then we had the little overshoot, and then we had the trend line break, and then we had a couple of legs up to a new high, and then we pulled back, and I thought we were going to sell off here. That's the reason I have this sell here, and it's the reason I sold there. But we made another push up. But it's not uncommon to get, it could be that this is leg one, and that could be leg one, and maybe this will be leg two, and that would be our target right there. So we'll see how that works out. I'll leave that arrow there just to see in the next, by the time the chart lesson's over. But if I'm wrong and this is it, then we haven't had a trend line break yet. We might have had an overshoot, but maybe the channel is way up here. So it's really hard to tell today. It was just kind of an odd trading day. But you have to go with what you see. And so until we make a bigger sell-off, I would still be thinking upwards for today. But I was thinking down at this point. But like I said, we could be just trying to make a second leg up here equal to this first leg. So we'll just have to see. But I got some emails today earlier about a channel, and somebody asked me why this trade worked and why this one failed, and I couldn't figure out why they were interested in this trade here. All I could see was this part of their chart, and they had a trend line coming off of there. But what they were looking at was this channel. They said a channel from yesterday, but let's just look. There's your lower side of the channel, and that was likely your upper side of the channel. But, and they, actually that's not what they had either. Yeah, I guess it is, because that would have brought that trade into play right there. And so it's kind of hard to know where your upper trend line is here, but what you wanted to do was work off this lower one like that, right? Probably that right there. And then you bring that up, and that's probably exactly what they were looking at. But let me show you a couple of things here just for those people. If anybody else was looking at that, I'm usually more interested in the current day's price action. So this trend line was more important to me, even though that's a trend within this channel. But let me show you a couple of things about this channel. We had an overshoot down here, and then we actually had a break of it up here first thing this morning, and then a move to a new low. So then you would be expecting to rally out of there anyway. And this was the trend from this move down. So you're more interested in this trend short term, and there's your break and your retest. And we didn't quite get a new low, but the market was too strong, and then off it took to the upside. So hopefully that makes sense for those people. I actually probably would have originally tried to draw this channel like this right here, but that doesn't really fit down here all that well. So I do believe that is the correct channel, but even at that rate, we had a break of it right here early this morning twice. And if you're going to be trading from a channel from the day before, you still got to pay attention to those breaks, even if it's in the overnight, if you're trading on a bigger picture like that. So, but we broke the trend line here and made a new low, but then we overshot the low. But this should have been your trend line to figure out when this was over, and there's your break, and then it comes back. and it makes an attempt to retest, but the market was just too strong. This was actually overdone, and if you've really got to lows right across there, and you see it did make a new low based on that, and this was just overdone really right here. But you know, generally you're going to get a retest with a new low, but the market was just too strong. And plus, a lot of times when you have an overshoot like that, you won't get a retest. You'll get a pullback of a test of the trend line or something of that nature, and you did get that right here too. We tried to come back several times, but the market was just too strong and kept going higher. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense for those people that ask about that. Let's talk about the trades we did have. Let's get this out of the way. Because, but generally, one more piece on that. Generally, the way I trade is I'm looking for the first two swings of the overnight, starting with the overnight, and that's going to be what I'm trading off of. And you can see that right here. We were in a downtrend. Usually I'm here about 7. I didn't get here at 7 today because it was Valentine's Day. I had some obligations to take care of, taking care of my wife, and so I didn't get in here till about 8:30 or 9 this morning. So the first trade I was able to take was right in here. But I'll talk about these others because they're fairly decent setups. But let's start with here. Here was your trend line. This is where I would have started trading this morning. I drew this one in green. I'm pretty sure I probably would have taken that trade right there. That's a second entry short. It's coming off the trend line. It's coming off the EMA. It would have been hard pressed not to take that trade. So I marked it in green because I wasn't here. But looking at it, it's a pullback to retest that breakout area. There's just too many reasons not to take that trade. It just happened to fail. But what I would have done, as soon as that ended as a doji, and we made this matching low, and this started trading higher, I would have exited that trade. I would have taken, probably as soon as that ended as a doji, I would have taken what I could, I would have taken a tick or break even or whatever. You could have got a tick out of this, or you could have easily gotten out of break even. But the reason being is that generally that trade is not going to, the next bar is not going to be a doji like that. Make it a little bigger. That's not a good sign. Generally, when that bar turns down like this, it's going to take on off a reversal bar like that. It's going to look more like something like this up here. It's not going to look like that. That's not a good sign. And that's a sign that, hey, we may be going to get a trend line break here. You're still looking for the retest, so when you got this bearish bar, you want to go short right there for certain. But on this one, if you had gotten trapped in this, when that ended as a doji, you know, and even though that ended as a doji, it doesn't mean prices wouldn't keep on going down, but you're better off just to exit because you see what happened. You went higher, got stopped out, and then it went down like you expected it to. But this was a great trade right here and a nice reversal bar. You go low right there. Look how bullish that bar is, and it broke above it, and then it's all stem, and it closes way back down in here. That's a good reversal bar, and easy scalp. Any runners, you could have ridden this down, and I would have held on to this. When we went into all this chop here, I probably would have exited, taken my money, and because now you got a chance to reverse and go long. This is a higher low. And the only reason I would go long here, I wouldn't have been expecting this to do what it did here. But notice all this overlap. This is, you got kind of a matching lows across here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we ticked lower and reversed. And you really could have gone long above that bar, but it probably would have been better to wait for here. And then you're getting back close to the EMA. So really, if you didn't enter somewhere down in here, it's a little more risky, a little more aggressive, but you know, this is a reversal type pattern. It's a little double bottom with a failed break lower, and generally they're good for a scalp at least. And like I said, I would have been looking for them to come back up and test these highs and maybe even this high And that's kind of where we started finding, you see, that's what most people were thinking, we were going to test this high and probably sell off again. And that's why we had a little trouble getting through. There was a lot of sales going on at that level at 15.50. So it was an important level of resistance. But you notice we got on through it, then we came back and tested it, and then we're working higher again. And that's what you expect to happen. So, but anyway, there was a nice long right here. If you saw it, this one was not very good. Look at all the overlap. It broke out the high side. Then it came down here and kind of broke out the low side. It would have worked, but not a very good setup. I didn't mark it. And then we came back, and of course we tested the trend line again. And this is a form, even though it, actually I'm not sure it completely failed. Let me just look at that. 1475. Now, it was good for a scalp. I was thinking this failed, but it was good enough for a scalp. But again, it came back and tested these lows across here, and it's at the EMA. It's at a possible trend line. You got that little gap in there. So, excuse me, but so I would have, I would definitely be wanting to thinking long right here. When you get those gaps, prices usually pull back, and that's usually usually those gaps happen right at support and resistance areas. And you can kind of see that line. There was a little support or resistance area there. But those gaps generally fill pretty quick. Now, that doesn't mean it couldn't have ticked up and turned back down. But coming off that trend line, I felt like that one was worth the effort. And it's somewhat of a failed second entry, even though it did work. It didn't go any lower. Now you got a little bit of a higher high over here. And so nice, you know, it's worth going long right there. Then again, the same thing, and again, it's this trend line's now been verified again, and it bounces right off of it again. I would have gone long there. You might have gotten shaken out of this one when it broke higher. And this one I actually meant to make green here, and it looks like I forgot to do that. Let's go ahead and make it green. But notice what's happening here. Even though we're not going a whole lot higher every time, we're making higher lows every time. And we've talked about that. We've seen that a lot lately. And that really made this one worthwhile because this is a breakout pullback long. It's coming right off the trend line again. Maybe that's why I didn't make it green, but there's not a lot of room up here to scalp out. And even on going back to this one, you might have gotten shaken out of this one. If you did, I can understand why once we broke up and started coming back down, if you let it come this far, I would have probably put my stop under that just to be safe. But generally, your best place for your stop is under your signal bar, and you can see if you did that, you would have had about a 4-tick stop, and you wouldn't have gotten stopped out, and it would have kept going higher. So it would have worked. It wouldn't have been any problem. No runners off of these. You did get a runner off this one. That was what was really neat about it. That's the one thing. The more aggressive trades are where you end up getting the runners in most cases. And that's where you make the most money. So that's one of the keys to taking the more aggressive trades, but you'd be better off just to get the scalp and forget about the runner until you get really good at picking the entries. So don't assume just because you want to try to catch runners, you ought to be taking more aggressive trades. But as you get to the point where you can see the trades and get more aggressive, then you'll find yourself getting more runners. And but then we ran up to a new high here. We overshot it. It was really tempting to go short right here. I had to bite my tongue and force myself not to because I know what happens when you come out of all that overlap. It usually snaps back, and it did. And then you got the reversal. You actually had a trap here and then a reversal. Notice that it went higher first above this little bar and then turned down. So you want to have your stop right below that bar, and you go short right there. And it took a little work to work on through here and get your 5 ticks. And no real big runners or anything. You probably, once you went into this overlap, you probably should have thought about exiting any runners and go ahead and getting out. Let's see how many ticks that actually was. Let's see what you would have. 1750 would have been your entry, and you see you would have been out right here. And when those bounced and started overlapping, I would have exited my runner and gone ahead and got my point out of my runner as well and not held on. and you would have got what, 2 more ticks, maybe 3 more, 2 more ticks at the most by uh, hanging on any longer. So it's just not worth hanging on to, especially with this trend line here. And normally you probably wouldn't even want to sell this right here, except for the fact that you had enough room to get out before coming back and testing this breakout area, and plus the fact that you had this overshoot. And to be honest, at the time, I really thought there was a chance we might have even had a trend line breakdown here, but I believe this was just the overnight, right at the open, coming off the overnight where the things get a little iffy, so to speak. And so I really think that's all this was. And so I didn't really, I was thinking this is probably not really a valid trend line break. We need to see a break after this point, after all those touches and confirmations of that trend line right there. And this was the first time you really got a break after, coming up through here. And another thing you got to look at too is you might have even considered this is where the trend started, because we were still in a downtrend till here. And if you do that, then that gives you this trend line, and this may be a valid trend line. I'm really concerned that I was reading it wrong to begin with, but as long as you follow the rules, it all still worked out fine. And so anyway, but then you had your trend line break. Notice you got all these matching lows across here. This was a little double top, but we broke above, and we came back and tested it once. We tested it again, and I love these kind of traps. Even though it went a little lower here than it did before, notice that that's actually what I want to explain is that that's actually a stronger double bottom than one that's equal. When this side goes lower, because what happens is this traps all the shorts in, it traps all the longs out, because everybody's stops are down here. There's people that think they want to go short right here, and then there's people that that are long, they're thinking I got to exit right here, and they just get trapped. So it traps out the longs, it takes them out of their long trades, and it puts shorts into new trades, and then all of a sudden it reverses, and all of a sudden it starts hitting the stops, and that's what drives it up again. And you got all these people constantly, that's why when I take a short like this, I'm only scalping out and then trying to catch a runner. And that way, if it does keep going, then I'm prepared. But if it doesn't, I still make money, and I don't have a loser. So that's the purpose of our scalp and run technique, so to speak. But this was a nice setup. You go long one tick above those 2 bars, you got your little trap. And really what happened was you came down here and you went up, and it kind of tested it. It didn't work. And then it tried it again, and it broke on through. And notice it tried to sell off, but it couldn't. So, but that's you got to just about take those failed breaks when the trend is up, because especially if you're looking for a retest anyway. And that's the thing, we're looking for a long still here anyway, because that was the first break of, even if there's a trend line, even if there is a trend line down here, you can't ignore that line right there regardless. It's still important. As long as it's holding prices, the more times it holds, the more important it is. And so you got to figure you're going to snap back and test this high no matter what happens. And we did. And then that's when I was looking for the short, because I believe this is the trend line. And it's looking more like it, but we're still not below that EMA you see right there. So unless we sell on off here, we may go ahead and try to push up one more time and make 2 legs, and there's your 2 legs. So we'll see. But you couldn't ignore this short, and of course it got just enough ticks to scalp out, and nothing more, no runners or anything like that. So, and that was really it for the day. It's almost 2 o'clock, and you see really from really about 12:30 to 2, we haven't done anything. We've made 8 or 10 bars there. So the volume's drying up. It really started drying up, in this area right here. But these choppy trends that just keep going high, let me just share this with you, and then I'm gonna call it a day. We're about 20 minutes here. Notice how each time it makes a higher low, and even here, a lot of times it'll be flat up here, but even here we're making a slightly higher high, and you just can't ignore that. That's, that's, even though it's choppy, sometimes that's the best you're going to get. And so if you don't feel comfortable, the one thing I always tell people, if you can't figure out what's going on and you're not comfortable, don't force a trade. You're better off to get up and walk away and take a break or call it a day. But don't force yourself to enter, because what's happening here is, because we're not going much higher, everybody's thinking short. And all these shorts are just getting trapped. And then look, they finally break it out and you hit all those stops. Everybody that was getting short was putting their stops back up here somewhere, and look, that's where you're hitting them right there. And that's why prices suddenly rocket up like that, because it's catching all the stops from all these people that were short in here. And it allows all the smart traders to exit easily up here, because there's lots of orders up there. So, and it just kind of propels itself. And then you get the people that are market chasers, all the weak traders, and they're chasing it, and they're the guys that just provide the little easy orders for the smart traders to get out. And then guess what happens? It sells just as soon as they're all buying. What happens? It sells off, and then they all start reversing, and the last of them, the really poor traders, are going to reverse right here to go short. They got long in here and they put their stops down here below that, and guess what? It goes just enough to catch their stop and suck in a bunch of new shorts, and the pattern just repeats itself again. And off it goes. It starts chopping higher, and then all of a sudden it hits some stops and it rushes up, and you'll see that all day long. Just stay with the trend. If you're not sure of anything else, stay with the trend, because I can tell you, I was tempted to buy here, but I held on because of all that overlap. But when we broke lower here, it was scary as heck to go long there. But I told myself, you got to take that trade, and you drop your order in there and you go, and you see it works. And all down through here, I guarantee you, most people were thinking short because they're thinking tops and all. But stay with the trend. And right now, everything's above the EMA. There's nothing really below that EMA except stems. If there's not even hardly any stems below it, that is a sign that the market's strong and the trend is up. And look how that EMA is pointing straight up. You got to stay with that. You can't ignore that. So hopefully that'll help you when you see this, and you're really seeing the same thing here. I'm starting to be of the opinion that maybe this is the trend line. And maybe I've got it wrong, but we won't know until the day finishes. And if the day finishes and we never get below this trend line, I would say that's probably the channel. And we just had the EMA was just holding prices here, and that's why we got that looks like a trend line. So anyway, hopefully all that makes sense to you. I'm going to call it a day and wrap it up. We'll be back to do it tomorrow and wrap up the week. Hopefully we'll have a good trading day tomorrow, but I'm going to wrap it up. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.